Take a slow breath in, and let it out gently. Again, breathe in, and breathe out. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands go still. Let whatever was pressing on you today begin to ease. There is no rush here. Tonight we will rest inside the story of the walls of Jericho, from the book of Joshua. A city taken not by siege, but by silence. Not by force, but by walking and obedience. 7 days of patience. 7 days of trust. A plan that made no sense to the world but was held together by faith. You do not need to picture every detail. You do not need to hold the whole story in your mind at once. Just let it move through you like a quiet wind across dry ground. If a thought rises, let it pass. If your body is still restless, let it settle slowly. The story will carry you at its own pace. One step at a time, one breath at a time. And as we begin, remember only this: God's plan holds. You can rest. Jericho was shut up tight because of the people of Israel. No one went out. No one came in. The gates were barred, the walls thick and high. It was a city held together by fear. The people inside had heard what God had done for Israel. They had heard about the parting of the waters. They had heard about the long march through the wilderness. And so they locked themselves inside their walls and waited. From the outside, Jericho looked impossible. The stones were ancient and well-fitted. The fortifications had been standing for generations. No army could simply walk up and push them over. But God was not troubled by the walls. What seemed impossible to the eye was already settled in the heart of God. And so God spoke to Joshua. Not with panic. Not with a complicated strategy of war. But with calm certainty. He had a plan. Sometimes the walls in our own lives feel just as high and just as old. But God sees what we cannot see from the ground. He speaks into the silence behind the walls. And His voice changes everything. God said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand. Its king, its mighty men of valor. All of it, already given." But the plan was strange. Not a battering ram. Not a siege tower. Not a night raid or a clever ambush. Walking. March around the city once each day for 6 days. 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Covenant. And on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. When the priests blow a long blast on the trumpets, all the people shall shout with a great shout. And the walls of the city will fall down flat. Imagine hearing that as a soldier. You have come all this way through the wilderness. You are standing before the most fortified city in the land. And the instruction is to walk in circles and wait. But that is how God often works. His plans do not always make sense to the mind at first. They ask for patience instead of power. Trust instead of tactics. And in the waiting, something deeper is being built. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. Joshua gathered the people and gave them one command above all others. You shall not shout or make your voice heard. Not a word shall come out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Silence. That was the discipline asked of them. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of obedience. And so the march began. The armed guard went first, steady and watchful. Then the 7 priests with their ram's horn trumpets, blowing as they walked. Behind them, the Ark of the Covenant, carried with reverence. And behind the Ark, the rear guard, quiet and faithful. They circled the city once. The dust rose beneath their feet. The walls of Jericho towered above them on every side. The people on the walls watched in confusion. What kind of army marches in silence? When the circuit was complete, they returned to camp. No battle cry. No clash of weapons. Just the soft sound of thousands of footsteps and the low voice of ram's horns fading into the evening air. Sometimes faith looks like simply showing up and walking the path you have been given. Without understanding everything. Without seeing the end from the beginning. Just walking. And trusting. The second day came. They marched again. Once around the city, in silence. Then they returned to camp. The third day. The same. The armed guard, the priests, the ark, the rear guard. One circuit. No words. Back to camp. The fourth day. The fifth. The sixth. Each morning they rose, formed the line, and walked. The people of Jericho watched from the walls. Nothing happened. No attack. No siege engines. No battering rams. Just the quiet march, the sound of rams' horns, and the deep silence of a people learning to wait. 6 days of the same walk. 6 days of dust and patience. 6 days of trusting what had not yet come to pass. There is something powerful about repeated faithfulness. About doing the quiet thing again and again without visible results. It builds something in the heart that force never could. The march was not wasted. The waiting was not empty. God was working in the silence. And the 7th day was almost here. On the 7th day they rose at dawn. The sky was still pale and cool. The camp stirred earlier than before. Something was different about this morning. They formed the line again. The armed guard. The 7 priests with the 7 trumpets. The Ark of the Covenant. The rear guard. And the people, still silent, still faithful. They marched around the city once. Twice. 3 times. 4. 5. 6. 7 times around the city on this final day. On the 7th circuit, the priests blew a long, sustained blast on the trumpets. The sound filled the valley and pressed against the stones. And Joshua spoke. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the people shouted. After 6 days of silence, they lifted their voices with a great shout. Not a cry of war alone, but a cry of faith released. The sound of a people who had walked and waited and trusted, finally given permission to let it all out. The silence had done its work. The obedience had prepared the ground. And now the moment had come. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. Those ancient stones, thick and towering, came down all at once. Not from the strike of a battering ram. Not from the cunning of a siege. But from the faithfulness of a people who did what they were told. Every man charged straight in. The city was taken. What had seemed impossible from the outside was accomplished by walking and waiting and trusting. No human strategy could have brought those walls down. No amount of force or cleverness. It was obedience that did what force could not. And there is a gentleness hidden inside this story, even here at its loudest moment. God did not ask his people to do something beyond their strength. He asked them to walk. He asked them to be quiet. He asked them to trust the timing. And when the moment came, he brought the walls down himself. The victory belonged to God. The people simply had to show up and obey. Day after day, step after step. The walls have fallen. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The silence was not weakness. The walking was not wasted. Obedience did what force could not. God's plan was enough. You do not have to force your way through. You do not have to push harder than you can bear. You do not have to break down every wall with your own hands. Some walls fall by waiting. Some walls fall by trust. Some walls fall because you simply showed up, day after day, and kept walking. The march is over now. The trumpets are quiet. The dust has settled on the road around Jericho. And what remains is peace. The peace of a thing that has been finished. Not by striving, but by faithfulness. You can trust. You can let go of the effort. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The march is over. The walls are down. The trumpets are quiet. You have walked far enough today. You can stop. The walls have fallen. The silence held. The obedience was not in vain. You do not need to march any further tonight. You do not need to carry anything more. The work is done. Let there be less effort now. Less inner striving. Less holding on. Your breathing can slow. In and out. Held and still. Quiet and safe. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest. The walls have fallen. The march is over. You are held. Obedience is enough. God's plan holds. You can rest.